1 year. And I think she tried to take pictures of at least most of them. And so somewhere between here and 240 birds, she's going to show us some pictures.
Wow.
Kathryn Alexander?
Kathryn Alexander. All right, come on up, Kathryn. If I can do this now. There we go. So to advance your screen, just hit this button. You want to go back, hit this button.
Okay.
And you will be in, see this frame right here? You will be, okay,
All right, am I on?
you're on.
Okay, so first of all, I have to correct Harry. I actually saw 214 birds, photographed 214 bird species this year. Starting from zero. I am not a birder. I am actually a photographer who decided that I really like bird photography. So this is Kathryn's Oregon 2022 big year, something I'd always dreamed of doing. Birds have fascinated me because they are so free. For most of them, the barriers like fences and houses and all of this, our infrastructure are no big deal to them. I have them zip through my backyard from a big fir tree to a tree across the way at a neighbor's house, over the house next door. And I just have found it so fascinating, their color and their plumage and their behavior between all the different species. I've just fallen in love with them. I just decided to do this big year because I also read, and I've read books about people who've done big years. I've seen the movie The Big Year. I don't know about the rest of you, but yeah. So I can't afford to jaunt all over the North America finding birds. So I limited myself to Oregon. And in December 2021, when I decided to do this, I was really in the doldrums. I had kind of reached a low point in my photography. I didn't feel challenged. And I had turned 73 the previous July. And I just feel like there wasn't that many great years left to me. Hopefully I'll have a lot, but one never knows. And that it was time. It was now or never. So off I went with my equipment. This is the camera I use. I began the year with a Canon R mirrorless camera, and I had a 150 to 600 Tamron telephoto lens. In May, I purchased a Canon RF mount 100 to 500 Canon lens because it has much quicker focus and much sharper. And you'll see as I go through the year here when I actually changed lenses and that it did make a difference. And in mid-August, I purchased the Canon R5, which has animal eye tracking, which is to die for, literally, as a photographer. It also has large file size, which was another issue because when you're photographing birds, in order to pull out that bird from the back, you need to crop. And so you need a large file size, at least I find I do. So the other essential equipment I use a bean bag. I actually put it in my vehicle window and put my camera on it. And 80% of the photographs I take of birds are out my vehicle window. I also use a monopole, and I just bought this little Wimberley monopole gimbal, which actually works pretty well. So when I'm walking around, I have support for that heavy. The camera's fairly heavy. The lens is, I'm not a big, strong, hefty person. So being able to manage that with a monopole works great. This is my faithful steed, Pony Boy. And Pony Boy is a converted camper van that I have a bed, I have an auxiliary battery, I have a small propane furnace in it and a pop top so I can actually stand up, and of course a little porta potty in it. So I have all the comforts. I can go and stay where I want. And I stayed quite a few nights in this thing this last year. I know I traveled at least 12,000 miles because I did an oil change in January, and one in December, and I think it was over 16,000 miles. And I don't drive around town very much, so easily 12,000 miles. Visited Malheur twice, Cabin Lake Bird Blinds twice, numerous visits to Ankeny and Vasca Slough and Finley. Drove to the coast more times this last year than I have in the last 30. Visited 4 sewage treatment ponds. Was stung by bees on 2 different occasions. The last time I was down at Finley at the headquarters taking pictures of acorn woodpeckers, and a bee got up my shirt and got me right in the back. I actually took a pelagic trip out to view ocean birds and was stunned at the wildlife that was out there. I mean, I'd heard, but until you see it, you have trouble believing it. And this trip was arranged by Bob Archer on Oball, and we had about 25 people and went about 32 miles offshore. It was awesome, and I didn't get seasick. What I saw and what I learned. So these little birds are pintail, and I shot this at Pintail Marsh at Ankeny in January. This was the first bird of the year, big year number 1. And they had just mated, and I thought he was going to drown her. He took her clear, she was clear underwater, but afterwards she popped up and they swam very proudly side by side for a moment. And it's just cool. Tundra spawns down at Finley, McFadden Marsh, and this little guy was also at Finley. This was on half a second. I've lost my place in my paperwork. Over here where I'm at. So this turkey vulture was at Bentley Overlook, and there were about 4 turkey vultures right there beside the road, and 3 of them flew off, but this guy hung around. So I drove past him. He still stayed. I got parked. I got my camera in the window, and I actually got this shot, and he seemed totally unbothered by me. I can't tell. I have no idea. Probably a dead deer, but I'm not, or elk possibly. Yeah. So the yellow rump warbler, I shot this on April 8th out at Ankeny at Eagle Marsh. He was in the trees and shrubs between the parking lot and the road. I'm standing right on the edge of the parking lot when I took these 2 photos. And I had never seen a yellow rump warbler before this year, really. And I fell in love with these little guys. I've seen them everywhere, taken photos everywhere. I have been astounded at the things I've seen and photographed this year, in case you can't tell. So I was out at Livermore Road. This was taken on April 14th. Of this Western meadowlark was grooming himself, and he got this great expression on his face. I don't think he's as mean as he looks. Song sparrow. This was taken down at Turtle Flats at Finley. I find Turtle Flats a really great area. There are lots of birds in there. Most times of the year. I've taken other photos there. I'll show you some of those in a minute. This little guy caught a bug. I've been kind of following him around trying to get his picture. They move so fast. I don't know about you, but song sparrows are quick little birds. I have spent I don't know how many hours this year chasing or trying to get pictures of little brown birds. At the same day, I took this picture of this ring-billed grebe. And pie-billed grebe. Thank you. I have it on here. I have the right name on here. I do. I just said it wrong. Take a deep breath and slow down. So anyway, this pie-billed grebe, and this guy's really cute. I also watched a mother pie-billed grebe at McFadden Marsh in July and August. and she had 5 young she was trying to feed. They were getting almost as big as her, but she was still feeding them. But she would go catch something like a crawfish or a big tadpole, and she would make them chase her, and she would dive underwater and they'd dive after her and stuff to try to get it from her. And eventually she'd give it to one, and then she was like right there with them until they got it ate. And several times they lost it and she had to go catch it. She'd go catch it and bring it back. But she was teaching them how to hunt. So it was a great experience. Just watching it. So in May, I got the new lens. And because I got the new lens, I got this photo of a tree swallow. And this was taken at Paloma Sewage Ponds. That's another place I enjoy very much. You might think it's kind of a stinky place, and I guess I don't have much sense of smell because it doesn't bother me. But anyway, the wind was blowing. You can tell from the waves in the picture. And so the tree swallows were coming in and plucking things off the surface. And like I said, I got this photo because of that new lens. And also down there, I came across this bird and I thought I was seeing things. I literally did. What is this? Yeah. And I thought it looks like something out of a fantasy movie to me. But it was just an awesome experience to actually get to see this bird. I'd seen pictures in my bird book, but it just the pictures didn't do it justice. So I went over to Malheur. This was in May. Came across this California quail perched up in the sagebrush, looking around. And I was parked along Seas Mountain Road between French Glen and Page Springs, and there's these big tall trees, and I don't know what they are, willows or black walnuts or something. They're cottonwoods. Thank you. I knew somebody here would know. So I was taking pictures of some cedar waxwings that were up in the cottonwoods, and I wasn't doing very well because they were moving around a lot and they were a little too far away. And then I see something kind of moving on in the verge along the far side of the road from me, and up pops this Wilson snipe, not 20 feet from me in my van, and I was able to get this shot. So this is back at Finley. There's at Turtle Flats, there's this restroom, and then there's this little paved path that goes back into a paved area where there's a bench. I think it's intended for people who are handicapped, possibly in a wheelchair. I don't know. But I went back in there. I've got my camera on my monopole, and I got this photo of these cedar waxwings. And I learned later from somebody's post on Obol that this is actually courting behavior, that the male will pass something to the female and she may pass it back. So I'm standing in that spot, and I also got a photo without hardly moving more than a couple of feet of a purple finch and a black-headed grosbeak right in that area at Turtle Flats. So I took a trip over to Cabin Lake, and we spent the first night, a friend of mine and I did, at Cold Springs Campground. Well, he was in the porta potty that morning, and I'm sitting in a van waiting for him. And along comes this red-breasted sapsucker, and it's moving around on the ground. It pops up on the tree trunk, and I got a great shot. And then my friend comes out, and off the bird goes, which is adorable. So we got to Cabin Lake, and here's this chipping sparrow, really cute little bird. Other birds I saw there and got photos of are crossbills and white-headed woodpecker and numerous other birds. And my second trip there, I took photos of pinion jays. But anyway, this little guy decided to take a bath, and then he got out and he was up on the little stick, ready to get dried off. I'm bored. It's July. I can't find any birds. You know, after you photograph so many of the common species, it gets harder to find birds. And so I drove out Tampico Road. I don't know why. I was just trying to find somewhere to go. And I walked up the Forest Peak Trail. I can't say I really hiked. I only went about, I don't even think I went hardly much more than a quarter of a mile. And it's hot. It's July. It's hot. I'm standing under this oak tree, feeling really frustrated, really down. I can't find any birds. I'm going to go home and for that day, and it'll be a complete bust. And then along comes this Western tanager and lights on this limb dead limb that's sticking up underneath this oak tree. And I got this beautiful shot of it. So it's still, summer, July. It's too hot to really do much of anything. So I thought, well, I'll go up to Silver Falls State Park and see what I can find up there. Well, all the parking lots are jammed with people. There's people everywhere. So I went to the North Campground group play area. And that was great. There wasn't hardly anybody in there. There were some cars, but most of those people had just walked down the trail to the falls trail. And so it was really quiet, and I kind of tiptoed around along a trail, and I found these two little birds flitting around, and I managed to stand in the shade of a tree, kind of to hide myself, and he came over and I got this shot. So even with the branch hanging over his eye, I was just thrilled to get this Wilson's warbler. I think he has nest material. So anyway, and he's looking at the camera, which is even awesome. Went up to the Nehalem fish hatchery, way up the North Nehalem River, because I saw an eBird that there were American dippers up there, and I had been looking for American dippers. I really wanted to get photos of them. And I'd gone to Elsie Falls and several other places, and I hadn't had any success. So I went up there, and gosh darn it, if you want to see American dippers, I guess that's a good place to go, because not more than 200 yards down this trail, there's a little waterfall, and then there's a trail that goes along the river up to the fishing platform by the fish hatchery, which is not more than about 200 yards between those 2 points. Halfway in between, there's this lovely rapids in there, and I saw and took pictures of about 5 or 6 American dippers in there. So I got my, and I really like this photo because of the light through the trees is turning the water so green gold. I really like that. Back down at the coast, I told you I went there a lot. I was at Otter Crest, and there were some robins, some other birds moving around. I had spent the night at Boiler Bay in the van, and so it was pretty early in the morning, and not many other people were there. And there were some little birds moving just down below the fence around the viewing area. And then all of a sudden, this little bird popped up right in front of me. I got a couple of shots off, and it was this golden crowned kinglet. So I went down to Beaver Creek, south of Newport. There's nature, state reserve. And I went to the headquarters there, and the park host lady, she said, well, we have bird feeders. You could, you're welcome to wander around and stay as long as you want. And was very welcoming to me. So I did. They have bird feeder there, like 3 or 4 of them, and hummingbird feeders. So one of the feeders is right by the old orchard. So I kind of stood like right by one so I could blend in with it. And I was able to get this picture of the Stellar Jay, and with all that fine detail in its tail and feathers. So. And I also got this picture of this hummingbird, this Rufus hummingbird. I call him my little angel. But that's that new lens that I bought. And because the lens was fast enough to focus on the bird even though the wings were moving. So. Back to Malheur in September. And I got up early and I went over to P Ranch. Those of you who've been over there, you know where I'm talking about. And I decided to walk down the river trail. Well, from the river trail, you can see the long barn. It's just just right there. And there was this red-shouldered hawk perched on the peak of the barn. And he looked at me and then he went back to looking around. He's looking for something. And then once in a while he'd look over at me. And I took so many shots of him. I got tired of photographing him. And I walked on down the trail and he was still there. But he was gone when I came back. So then I drove up next day, I drove up Steens Mountain Loop and I came to an area with these kind of dead shrubs. And there was this Say's Phoebe there. I've been looking everywhere for one, both of my trips to Malheur. And so I parked and got out and started seeing if I could get close to this bird. And the sky was overcast and the bird and the background blended so much that I couldn't get my camera to focus. And I actually had to manually focus it, which is not my big thing, but I can if I have to. And that's what I had to do. Well, then when I got home, I had to do a lot of work on this photo to bring the bird out enough so that you can see it. So this is not the world's best photo of a Say's Phoebe. I think it lacks some detail that you might see in better photos, but I was ecstatic to have seen and photographed that bird. So in October, I decided, well, I haven't been to Summer Lake. I want to go to Summer Lake really bad. So off I went, and I got down there on Friday night at 7 o'clock, thinking, oh, nobody will be here. It'll be great. It's kind of the off season, should be wonderful. There were trucks everywhere, big trailers, guys. The office was open at 7 o'clock at night. I'm going, what's going on? I went in, I talked to the wildlife guy behind the counter, and he broke it to me. He was really nice. He said, duck hunting season starts tomorrow. He said, I don't think you're going to be able to photograph birds. I don't even think you can find a place out there to park so you can camp. And he said, were you going to go anywhere else? And I said, well, I was going to go down to Clements Lake. He said, he was really sweet. He suggested that maybe I just move on. And between us, we figured out there was a wide spot back up the road towards Silver Lake where I could pull off and actually spend the night. So that's what I did. And then I drove across Klamath Marsh, didn't see much there. Actually went to Crater Lake. Then I went down and to Upper Klamath Lake and was down there for a couple of nights. So at Klamath Lake, I got this photo. Oh, I forgot to tell you about this one. So this is a lesser goldfinch. He and various other like white crowned sparrows and were feeding in the weeds on the roadside, and the sun was coming up. I had great light on them, and I was able to get this photo. There were, okay. So anyway, the other species I photographed were these ring-billed gulls, and I really like this photo because they look like old codgers. You come into town and they're checking out the traffic going by on the road. I really like the little black ring around their eyes and their bill. But the main species I'd gone down there to photograph were the Clark's grebe. I also got pictures of Western grebe and some common mergansers, some American white pelicans, and some other birds. So back home, back over to Newport. This was in November. I got down there at South Jetty Road. There's some rocks that are perpendicular to the jetty that stick out into the bay. And right there were these harlequin ducks. There was a male and female on the rock, and then in the water was this guy in the foreground, and he was, the tide was so high that the water was coming in and then it was going back out, and he just floated back and forth. All the time he was in the water, he's grooving himself, and finally he got out, and I got this shot of him. Well, just down the way is another big line of rocks that jet out into the bay, and on them were a bunch of brown pelicans. And I was probably as close to them as I will ever get to brown pelicans. There were a dozen or more. And after a little bit, a group of them went over, actually flew and dropped down into the water right in front of me. And they started beating their wings on the water. And I don't mean just tapping. They were bam, bam, bam. And I've since learned that it was to drive the small fish so they could catch them. Anyway, this group of 5 are probably 2 adults, 3 juveniles. So it's probably a family group. And this guy was grooming himself that day, and I just thought that photo was quite comical. And this photo is number 214. I took this December 3rd down at Finley. As usual, I closed the place, which means that I was probably the last person off the refuge. It was after 5 o'clock. I had just passed Prairie Overlook and was headed for Highway 99W. And I saw this white patch right there by the road and up on top of a blackberry briar. And I stopped, I got the camera back out, and sure enough, it was a northern shrike. I had been looking all over for a northern shrike, and there he was. I'd missed a shrike out at Livermore Road at least twice prior to this, but there he was, and they held perfectly still for me because my shutter speed at that time of day in December, the sun had already gone down. It was getting dark, and I was able to get this photo. And that's the end.
Any questions in chat? Okay.
No.
I do have cards if anybody wants any of the cards that are on
Okay.
the screen.
Thank you very much. Birds in Oregon. Stephanie Hazen.
We can advance here and back here.
Okay, thanks. Hi. I don't keep a diary, but I've noticed that all my pictures are my diary and they all have stories. So we're going to skip around with different bird pictures and tell the story. So I used to be a kayaker, and I've taken lots and lots of trips, and we were coming down the Willamette River one time, and my friends wanted to stop at the Rogue Hop Farm, and they had tasting room, and I'm not much on beer. So I asked the people who own the brewery if I could take photos of their chickens. And so I sat among the chickens and got all these photos. And the funny thing is that rooster photo has sold several times. Who would want a rooster photo? But it has. It sold at a Seven Brides Brewery. My photo club used to have photo shows there. So now they're greeting cards and they are very popular. Ray and I took a trip to John Day camping a few years ago, and we drove by this apple tree that was absolutely chock full of cedar waxwings. So we stopped, I got out the camera and we thought, what are they doing? Well, I learned that they eat petals. They weren't destroying the blossoms, so there were going to be plenty of apples there, but they were eating apple petals. And so I made this picture into a lot of greeting cards. One time, Ray and I were downtown in the afternoon, downtown Salem, and the sky was just beautiful. So I took a picture of the sky and I took it to the print shop downtown, whose name I can't remember right now, and had a huge poster made of it. And so then I took that poster and I used it to do portraits of birds. So when Turtle Ridge Wildlife Center was still working, I went down and said, I'd like to take a picture of your kestrel for our newsletter, the Kestrel. And so they brought her out and I got her picture. You can see she has a dropped wing. She was a rescue bird and they had their red-tailed hawk. They said, oh, we have something even more interesting. So they had a baby barn owl that the history was that his tree had been cut down and the nest was, exposed. And so the people who owned the property had raised the barn owls and this one wouldn't fly away. He was imprinted. And so they didn't know what to do. So they brought the bird to Turtle Ridge and they were going to get it wild, put it in a large cage and let it fly. Well, in the meantime, I got my poster and I put it behind the bird and I was in a walk-in cage, and also in that walk-in cage was a porcupine, and porcupines want to go up and there was nothing for him to go up on and he crawled up my leg. And so how do you get rid of a porcupine? Well, the trick is you take your finger and you run it down their chin. So they did that and they got the porcupine off and he came back up again. There was no place for him to be. And so finally we got the porcupine into a dog kennel and I finished my portraits of the three birds. So Ray and I do raptor runs, which is, some of you know what they are, but some of you may not know what they are. We go on a winter bird survey once a month. We have a prescribed route. And we're always looking for birds of prey. And so this one was pretty fun because the sheep are lambing right now and they die. And so if they're still out in the fields, the eagles will fight over them. And so you can see the eagle on the top has got a sheep kidney in his mouth. So Ankeny is a great place to get pictures of birds. And this is the Pintail Marsh Boardwalk Trail. And one year there was a bush tit nest. And bush tits work as a community, building the nest and taking care and all this sort of thing. And this nest is like a hollow sock and the babies are all down at the bottom and the hole is at the top. Well, if you look carefully, what's different about these two birds? Their eyes. So the female has a white iris or eye ring and the male is black. And so that's a little known fact unless you're a birder. So one day, my friend Jan Irene Miller, she and her husband Jim Bayek and Jan Irene Miller own the old Bird Haven property out by Staten. It's about 200 acres that was owned by Tony Cook. And she said, Stephanie, you've got to come. I've got a pygmy owl right outside my kitchen window. So I got in the car and I drove out there, and halfway there, she called, Stephanie, he's not there. So I turned around and went back home and she called again. She said, no, he's there, he's there. So I drove out there and she let me be. And I was out there between 1 and 2 hours. And I just walked slowly and slowly and slowly. I had my point and shoot camera and he wasn't going away. So I got out my tripod and my big lens and I got all the pictures I wanted. And then I left and the bird was still there. So that was pretty cool. And this is where they get the eyes in the back of your head story. So he turned his head around and, there's various theories, but hopefully that's a camouflage so birds don't sneak up behind them. They think they can see from both sides. I can see that that little bird has blood on his bill. So he had just had a little meal. So I got brave and I entered the state fair one year and I put this picture in and it got judge's choice. And I was so sad. My friend, I said, I didn't win first prize. I got judge's choice. She said, they created that for you. That's better than first prize. And I said, oh, and somebody bought the picture. So that was pretty cool. Bought it at the fair. My friend Cassie Roos used to be manager of the grounds out at Illahee Golf Course. And so we got to know her because she called Salem Audubon and asked for help putting up bird boxes. She was trying to get Illahee certified with Audubon International as a conservation-minded golf course. And I'm not sure what the title is, but she knew where all the birds were and where all the nooks and crannies were. So while we were taking care of the bird boxes that Ray built and put up for her, she knew where the great horned owl lived. So we went over to see the great horned owl, and lo and behold, Cassie has eyes like a hawk. And we found the pellets that the hawk or that the owl had been vomiting up or regurgitating. Can you imagine how many individual little creatures that it would be before you finally vomited up the bones and the fur? So this is to remind me of what a keystone species is. So without woodpeckers and without bird boxes, we wouldn't have any cavity nesting birds. And because so many people take out dead trees and have clean properties, we have fewer and fewer cavities for other birds to live in who cannot manage to make their own cavities. So Ray, being a woodworker, put up a lot of bird boxes at our place, and he actually has them all over the valley as his fame has gotten wide. So he put up this box when we moved out to our property several years ago, thinking that we would get wood ducks because we have this little bitty creek. Well, who moved in? This is Fred the screech owl. And Fred, we don't know what Fred's real name is, but every year it's Fred. So we've had baby screech owls for 3 out of the 11 or 12 years we've lived out there. And one time we camped out on our deck because we knew they were feeding at night, and we got to see all of that. Ray takes the nest boxes apart in the winter and cleans them out, and usually they eat rodents, but one year there weren't too many rodents, and so they were eating mostly birds. And so Ray sent the feathers down to Pepper Trail, who's the bird expert in Ashland, who has a publication online where you can identify birds by species. Is that right? How I should say that? He has a feather atlas. And so that year, let's see. That year we had the collection of feathers from this year's nest box was reviewed by Pepper Trail, originator of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Feather Atlas of North American birds. His review cannot estimate the total number of birds taken or the number of individuals of any species. However, the feather assemblage demonstrates at least cedar waxwings, western bluebirds, California scrub jays, American robins, spotted towhees, possibly brewers or red-winged blackbirds, and possibly juvenile European starlings, all brought in by this owl to the chicks. Oh. So other cavity nesters are swallows, and these little swallows overwinter in Central and South America, and they fly all the way up here. And if there's no woodpecker holes available, all they can do is use a box that a human has made. So those are very, very, very important. So we inherited a bluebird trail, and we began to know other kinds of birds that nest. We began to recognize nests. If we hadn't had that experience, we wouldn't know it. So the upper left, the nest is made mostly of sticks from blackberries. Can you imagine breaking off all those sticks and sticking them in that nest and then lining it with feathers? Well, that's a house wren for you. And house wrens are aggressive little guys. They'll even take the bird's eggs out of another nest of somebody else and drop it on the ground. And we've witnessed that. They'll also, if you have a lot of nests in one area, they'll fill them all up with sticks. So nobody gets to use them except them. If you find a nest that is lined by feathers that's made of grass, that's going to be some kind of swallow nest. And if you find a nest that doesn't have very many feathers or hardly any feathers at all, but blue eggs, it's going to be a bluebird nest, except when the eggs are white. We had one pair that year after year laid white eggs. So one year, Ray took apart a house wren nest and he counted the sticks. There were 1,972 sticks in that nest. So also your wrens will have brown eggs and they'll put a little bit of feather in. But can you imagine doing that 5 times so that the area's 5 nests can't be used? Hey, that's amazing. And then robin's nests always have mud in them and they're always on a ledge. So this robin nested in our RV cover and you can see a grass nest lined with mud. So, whoops, I got too ahead of myself. Chickadees in our area also are overachievers. Last year, we had 5 nest boxes in close proximity and they were all filled by moss picked off of trees by chickadees. One of them got used by chickadees. One nest box got used by chipmunks. One got used by white-breasted nuthatches. One got used by swallows. And one got used by bees. So this is Bombus melanopygus, the black-tailed bumblebee, and this bee will live in nest boxes. Lori Ashworth, my friend from when I first came to Salem, she invited me over, and this is her bird's nest that she didn't clean out, and it was inhabited by Bombus melanopygus, and we've had that happen twice at our house. So they'll use old bird nests, but you can stuff it full of dryer lint. You could get stuffing from a furniture, you could buy it. The bumblebees will often live in insulation of your house if there's a crack, you know. So it pays to not take apart all your bird boxes or put them in a place where a bird wouldn't really like them, like way back in the branches of a bush, but a bumblebee could find them. So one year it was snowing and Ray knew I was interested in photography. And so he set up a real narrow tent that you would take on a camping trip to take a shower in. And so I sat there huddled in all the snow and I put peanut butter on all these sticks. And so I got these pictures of these birds in snow, the yellow-rumped warbler, a flicker, and bluebird. So the bluebirds live at our house because of Ray's nest boxes. Now, one time I went up to Skagit, and I think Karl was on that trip, and we saw the swans. And I can't tell a trumpeter swan from a tundra swan. So I'm calling these trumpeter swans because they were there that day. And we went out really early, and they were just coming down from the north like droves. It was just, and they were coming to land in a field right over our heads. And so we were on the road and they were, you know, right by the car and everything. And I was just amazed. So I got this picture and I saved it. When Ray and I got married 12 years ago, this was our wedding picture or wedding invitation. So yeah. One time we were up in the Santiam Pass and there was some rufous hummingbirds sipping at mullein flowers. And so I got to do a little study of these little hummingbirds and realized how long their tongues were and that they take naps. And so that was just kind of fun. Yeah. So we really are interested in bluebirds. I mean, I'm interested in monarch butterflies, but we are really interested in bluebirds. So you can tell they're about the same. So we've discovered a lot putting bluebird boxes up on our property and then having the bluebird trail that we monitor. We go ahead and order mealworms online from exotic nutrition, soak them or just put them out in a pan of water. And so that when they're feeding their babies, they're not dehydrating their babies, or at least that's my hope. One time we had them, the same pair have 3 clutches in one summer, and we learned that the males go ahead and raise the babies. And then from that clutch, those teenagers will help raise the next clutch. And from that clutch, those teenagers will help raise the third. And I never knew that if we hadn't seen that in our backyard. Also, a habit we have is we don't put bird food in feeders other than suet. We spread it widely on the ground. I'm a retired veterinarian, and I think if there's a concentration of saliva and poop on a feeder and you're not cleaning it as well as you're eating your own eating dishes, you're just asking for disease. So we spread it widely over the back. We discovered there's less competition. Everybody gets a bite. I think there's less poop in one spot, and you get really neat birds like this, like a little white-throated sparrow. They come very occasionally in the winter. So also our bluebirds are so tame, they come and tap on the window and say, it's time, in the morning. And so on a snowy day, I can open the sliding glass door, have my camera out a crack, sit on the floor, and right there is the bluebird eating the mealworms that I order, especially online. So we have spoiled bluebirds. The other thing that birds do is they give you interesting adventures. And so last summer we went to the Lucky Newt Natural Area, and we joined Joan Hager and Joe Say. I was combining their names, and one of the trips Harry was along, and so we got to observe bird banding and all of its intricacies. And so they put out very fine mist nets very quickly. They catch the birds, put them in those little bags, come back and weigh them and measure them, and put bands on them and turn them loose. For this area, the purpose was to find out if the reforestation of that riparian strip was actually doing any good for songbirds, and it was. So the other thing is I make greeting cards, and we live near a holly farm. And one year the holly berries were just packed with robins. And so I got permission from the owner. And so we walked among the holly's berries and got pictures that I use for Christmas cards. Last series is this summer, I got to watch a little Anna's hummingbird learn to feed. And it didn't know how to hover. I never knew that. You wouldn't know that without a camera. I wouldn't know that. And what it did was it stood on all its flowers and stood on all its leaves. And by the end of the summer, it had learned to hover. The last thing is I'd like to encourage you to avoid window strikes. So we use parachute cord, and Ray makes these covers. You can also order them from Acopion Bird Savers. You can see at certain times of the day how reflective glass is and how it looks like a perfectly good place to fly. And that's not every hour of the day, it's just certain times. And so you can either draw stripes with a pen that you get at the art department downtown and stripe your windows, or you can make savers, or you can go to Jeff Acopion's site and give them the measurements of your window, and they come in the mail by magic. And that's it. Any questions? Questions?
No chat questions.
Okay.
Unless there's some in the room.
All right, thanks.
Thank you very much. Well, we're gonna do some raptors now. John? Have your eagle eyes, folks.
Oh, okay, there we go. Raptors of Oregon. I've been birding for longer than 20 years, but been doing raptor running for 13 years or so. That's Stephanie was saying, certain routes that are dictated by the founder, which a guy named Jeff Fleischer, and he's got raptor runs now for, you know, how far a guy can, or a person can go, and maybe anywhere from 4 to 6 or 7 hours, and run the route and count how many raptors they see. And he has them all over Oregon, Northern California, now into Idaho, and lots of Washington. So they're, yeah, so it's really going around. Anyway, so actually I cheated here. I went up to Ridgefield for this photo, this red tail saying, let's go that way. That's where they went. So we'll see how, if I can make this thing go that way. There we go. Okay. So starting with falcons, and actually the American kestrel is Salem Audubon's theme bird. And nicely enough, this Salem Audubon theme bird is at the Salem Audubon Nature Center at Ankeny. So I thought that was really nice of him to be there, and in this nice little sunny day. Like Steffi was saying about a wedding photo, well, I had a friend of mine, Vic Brockett, who took the center thing out of the bird that's on the left there, and we used that pair for our wedding invitation for Penina and I's mine wedding this summer. And so some may ask, well, how do you know for sure that's a male and female? Well, you can look at the speckles on the one on the left and the breast, and then the softer stripes on the right, and then get a little better look and see the broad black stripe there. If you look really carefully, you can't see it on this one, but the bird on the left has its wing that's on the left of the photo up a little bit, and you see that it's blue. So telltale male, and then the female with the softer stripes on the belly there, and closer stripes on the tail. Then we have another female kestrel, again at the Nature Center at Ankeny. So lots of good birds at Ankeny, as we'll see tonight. This guy, however, was at another area that I love to go birding. It's on the road not far going to the Malheur Field Station. And I thought it was rather dramatic, and I lucked out that it was in focus, since I don't have a fancy camera that can capture the eye as it's moving at me. So I kind of thought this is kind of neat. Moving along with other falcons, again, at Ankeny. This is, however, on Windtail Road, just over the railroad tracks on the west side. Late afternoon, you can see the sun on one side of him and not on the other, on the south side of him. And he said, okay, I posed it long enough, and I had taken a dozen photos by then, so time to go. Here's a Merlin, and this guy, another Merlin. This guy, however, is on the eastern side of the state at Malheur, one of my favorite areas for bird photography. According to Sibley's, I looked at the pictures there, and this guy, this is what he labels as the prairie variety of Merlin. Also at the same location, which is the headquarters of Malheur Wildlife Refuge, is a peregrine. So I'll show you a bunch of the photos I got from that location. And again, kind of a neat place to go. This one, however, this peregrine is on the other side of the state at Newport. You went ahead, just north of Newport there. And I'm sure a lot of you who have been over there have seen either this fellow or one of his family. They have quite a family of them that have been there for generations, apparently. This is a youngster here. On the East Salem Raptor Run, which I know some of you are taking over my thing. I've retired from raptor running. I have 3 that I've really enjoyed, but this year was just a little much for me, getting married and then getting a severe case of type A flu and at Thanksgiving, and just not being that spiffy. I just couldn't keep up with everything. So I turned it over to the founder, Fletcher, and he was able to find good people to take it out. However, this one here is kind of neat. This is a juvenile, as you can tell by this vertical striping on its breast. And that was right here in, not downtown Salem, but in Northeast Salem on Hampton Lane, not far from Corden Road. This one is also near Salem. It's in Ankeny again. This is a male. You can see the different striping on its breast there. Somewhere, I'm not sure if that is over Pintail Marsh or somewhere else. I think it was closer up by the Nature Center again. This guy, I took with me a while before I saw prairie falcon, and it was long ago, on a family camping trip in the eastern Ochocos, not far from Spanish Peak. So I lucked out to get this picture of him, but it's, you notice the narrow mustache stripe. We'll get some more identification marks here on some of the birds. This prairie falcon was seen on a Christmas bird count, the Dallas Christmas bird count. In this case, this bird was southwest of Monmouth in the fields there, but nice pose for us. Now this one here is on the Brownsville Raptor Run, which is probably got more raptors per mile than any other of the raptor runs that I know of. But some identifying marks, if you see a bird flying in the sky, I'm too slow in my binoculars to really memorize what I'm seeing at an instant in the sky. But the photo I can look at, they're auxiliaries, but I call them the bird's wing armpits are black or dark color anyway. And he has the mustache that falcons have is a very thin one. And two factors along with some others are the most obvious ones that identify this as a prairie falcon. Similar coloration, but a different bird is the northern harrier. It has two different basic plumages. One is sort of brown and black and white. The other we'll see in a moment. But this one, the brown, black, and white ones are sometimes juveniles of both sexes, or sometimes adult females. This happens to be an adult female because of the striping on the breast indicates that it's an adult. They have that kind of collar around the head. I think is really kind of cool, but also diagnostic carriers. Here, one's again on a raptor route just off of Silverton Road, having an interaction with American crow. But that one, that particular northern harrier is a juvenile. You can see by the smooth blush orangish chest without the prominent striping on it. So, however, this one is unmistakable. Well, this male northern harrier is often called a gray ghost, as maybe this photograph can allude to. It's different sunlight, maybe slightly different whitish color. Here's one over near Dallas. I have it listed as being part of the Christmas third count Dallas, but this was actually, with all the greenery, I'm wondering if I have the dates wrong on that. But it's on just off of Lammer's Road on the south end, and he's over there. I have a whole series, but because of time, I decided I have to limit it down to just two. But he's doing the survey here, and there he is with his catch. A little, I don't know if that's a shrew or some little short-tailed mouse type creature there, but he was successful there. And this is on one of Harry's adventures down to Malheur. This is on a cliff on the highway going west from French Glen. Then also in the Malheur area, back to my favorite location at headquarters, is a red-tailed hawk welcoming the morning sun. About a couple of miles to the east of headquarters, in the grassland areas, there are ferruginous hawks. I'm showing tonight, but this white bird with the black mask, I think it's just an awesome creature to behold in there. There were several of them feeding in a field there. Again, not far from the Malheur Wildlife Center headquarters. This guy is down Heidelstein Park, I believe, which is just a couple miles north of Klamath Falls. These aren't the best pictures. I have some better ones on a hard drive I couldn't find, so I don't know whether. Anyway, a beautiful bird. Often see them when we're down in the Klamath area. Back up to the east again, just a little bit west of Burns, is a Swainson's hawk. Will be related to another hawk we'll be talking about towards the end of the program. But there's the Swainson's, just a little bit west of Burns. And the popular red-shouldered hawk, again, just around the Nature Center at Ankeny. That's a great place to find birds. This one, however, is on the other side. It's just across the street from the hotel at French Glen. And here is the red-shouldered hawk. He's being checked out by an American kestrel swimming around him. But behold, you don't have to travel far to find great birds if you're lucky. I found this red-shouldered hawk in my backyard once. And oh, where's my camera? Run in, and he's still there by the time I got back. It's incredible. But I just love this photo. I mean, geez, right there. How can I miss? I think we've seen other pictures of numerous eagles. You can read different texts. One I was reading says you can count about 7 different distinct plumages of bald eagles. This was taken on Gap Road, just a mile down from the city center of greater downtown Brownsville. So you can see Brownsville is a really neat raptor run route. It's even got a raven at this up at the top there, which is a country bird right there. Well, Brownsville kind of a country town. So I don't know how many different of the patterns that we see here. I think there are at least 3 different plumages of the bald eagles there. Juvenile, adult, subadult. Well, we won't have time to go point them out here. This is what they call the phase 3 or the plumage 3. He's, you can call him a subadult if you want. He's got a whitish head, what I call the Lone Ranger mask. His beak is not quite all golden yellow yet. So he's a subadult, probably a 2nd year bird. They get to their adult plumage sometime during the 3rd or 4th year as their full adult plumage, even though they have 7 different categories of plumages. So go figure. Here's the one that we all say, those were my early pictures at Turner at the quarry pond across the street from the subdivision there. But I thought the lighting was good that morning, and so turned out better than my average anyway. And this guy, ready for action. This at Pintail Marsh. Sometimes on Sunday mornings, photographers will go there for Sunday services. And there was a crew out then, and I don't go there enough to wait to get the perfect one of the eagles interacting. But sometimes there's other kinds of interaction. Here's one eagle getting the, okay, take off there, says the red-winged blackbird. I don't know if it's exactly like that, but yeah, thought it was interesting. But eagles are a lovely bird to look at. Here are the reflections of silver basket slew. And he's got, I don't know, I think a small bird in his talons there. But I just thought, you know, eagles and reflections are kind of cool. And so did that guy. Got to say, well, that's a cool bird. There are various ways of them to admire themselves. Sometimes they'll go and give a, and that, you know, you hear in all the cowboy movies when the eagles are up there, they're not really eagles making the sounds. It's red-tailed hawks that are doing the screeching. And this is as more of a little whinny chortle sound, kind of like a, I won't go into that. But anyway, my friend Vic at Brockett and myself, he takes me all these neat places, get some neat photos. This one was at Smith Rock, just a little bit north and east of Redmond. And so anyway, this bird in the series I'll show you just in a second here was about 50, maybe 30 yards down the slope from where we were. And it was on a tall ponderosa, so it's at eye level, not more than 30 yards away. And so that was just, you can't believe how lucky we were. And so he's going to say, okay, enough of this. I'm going zoom over the edge around there, even close up with my ancient camera could lucked out there. So anyway, it was kind of fun. Also with Vic Brockett, I'm sorry he can't be here tonight. He's not that social loving, but we were on a trip down in Klamath Falls. Technically, we were just across the California border on State Line Highway there, when we were driving down the road in his pickup truck. And we see this bird coming at us from the west, flying towards us. It was in the morning. And I had about 30 seconds to jump out of the pickup, get my camera, I had a 400mm lens, and try to get this as he's zooming right by us at warp speed. It was an exciting adventure. Again, it was kind of a lucky, out of the 10,000 photos I have, this is one of my favorites.
Golden eagle.
Golden eagle. There's another golden eagle in the area, gives a little bit different contrast. Here's another white bird. All you fishing scenarios, I don't know if you can see that fish there. I don't think it looks like a trout, but I don't know, not a sunfish. But you guys can kind of figure that out maybe some other time.
Okay, Tim. What is it?
What?
I think it's
The trout? Oh, okay. Well, I'll buy that. It's kind of a trout shaped, although interesting coloration to it.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, he's on a mission there. And that, very important, you can see the determination of this mission. And yes, it's about time. We need that mission to arrive. So that's kind of cool. Here he comes. Other white birds of interest are kites. The only place I've found them in Oregon at Fern Ridge, but they're kind of like a ghost of their own design.
They're breeding up by Grand Ron,
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's neat.
about 4 miles straight north from the casino.
Okay.
They're year round, they don't migrate.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's neat. Well, he was saying, the other guy was saying, well, this is my territory, as they were having a little discussion about it. But I think they made up and took off later on. But Fern Ridge is also a pretty good place to find it. But yeah, I didn't know that. Okay. Now we get into some more birds in my own backyard. This Cooper's hawk is an adult. However, at one point in his life, either younger or some of his offspring, they may have been a little more rambunctious. I call them my teenage ninja Cooper hawks. There's a fence right across the alley from where I live, and they found this to be a good sparring area as he's coming. Mine! Oh, it's mine. Oh, yeah? Well, what is that? What do you think? You. You can make up your own descriptions. And this is just a few of the photos I happened to take when I was out in the yard. I ran back in, got the camera, and they were still there. I just lucked out. Anyway, it was kind of fun. Oh, there's one more. Just about ready to, okay, you're out of here. You're down and out. Okay, back to more calm and peaceful area. At least this is before the sit-in at Malheur, is the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge headquarters when there was peace and quiet and still water in the pond. But in the morning area, as those of us who like to go out to Malheur, we love to be there from the sunrise in the morning. It's just beautiful. Have a lot of neat things, as you've seen some of the pictures. This great horned owl is at the headquarters there in the morning as well. Also in the neighborhood, but halfway to Nevada from there, just across from the little store at Fields where you have the world's best milkshakes there. You go across, there's a little round area with
They call it the oasis.
the oasis, thank you. And there's a young great horn there. And another year, there's a younger chick that was in that same location. But it's quite interesting to know it. oasis in the middle of the desert.
Right.
And again, with Big Brocket, we happened to find a lot of neat birds around the state, and we'll go charging off and try to find, this was years ago. But this is up at Fort Stevens State Park, and there's a, what do you call it when there's an emergence of snowy owls?
An eruption.
An eruption, yeah. Well, this was an eruption. There were several snowy owls seen at Fort Stevens State Park. So there were photographers everywhere. This is the one time and the one photo that I have that I had a little bit bigger lens. I had a 600 millimeter, but unlike what some of the folks have shown, this one is that long and weighs about 20 pounds, it feels like. But anyway, so this picture was taken, probably, I don't know, at least 30 yards away. But even so, we try to maintain photographers' anthem of not bothering the wildlife. And so I didn't approach, but it was still too close for his comfort. So he took off, unfortunately. Fortunately for the photographer, but not so good for being good. But he flew off. I lucked out and got some nice pictures of him taken away. So those were a few of them, but beautiful snowy owl. Also, on the other way, you saw the golden eagle that was coming at me. Well, Panina, my wife, and I were on our raptor route south of Silverton on 117th Street near Kunze Way. And these two birds off in the distance were flying towards us straight down the road at us. Oh, what are they? Are they flapping? Is that some kind of hawk? And by the time I figured out what it was, jumped out of the car. This is my 400 millimeter lens again as it comes zooming over me. So short-eared owl. Just another lucky shot. There's a pair of them that were, this is our road. We're going down this. You can sit there if you want. Another good spot, back again now here at headquarters. This is about a half mile down the road towards the lake from headquarters, but light was good. I just thought, oh, that's a neat shot. You almost see his short little ears up there, or at least the feathers that you talk about the ears. Best spot for if you want to photograph or just come out and look at short-eared owls on Diamond, excuse me, on Diamond Hill Road, which is south of Brownsville, just to the east of I-5, and go about a quarter to half mile east on the north side of the road is a place you can, a very narrow driveway you can pull in a few feet, and at sunset is a good time to go out and see these creatures. This was a little before sunset. You can see the flicker in the background there. This was at sunset, and you can just see, it's a lot to behold. This is the old place where we used to watch, look closer on Farmer Road, west of Salem here. And I haven't, in the last couple of years, I haven't seen any, but this was before then.
That's our raptor route, and we haven't seen it.
Yeah, so they're gone now, but it used to be a good place to go, and they'd go through their antics there as well. This guy, Jeff Leitcher, also told us about, even though it's not on a raptor route, but he knew I like to take pictures of birds. So he sent me over here. So Big Brocket and I took off and got a picture of this burrowing owl. And he was just outside, just beyond a ditch along a little dirt road, just west or east of Halsey. And those tags that you see on them, I was able to get pictures all the way. I'm not going around, but I got different angles. So I could see all the numbers on those and blow them up, send them into, there's a place in New Jersey that identifies all the bird tags all over. And they told me it was released in British Columbia, about 450 miles from where this site was.
Wow.
It flew down a month earlier.
Wow.
A month earlier, and 450 miles down, wintertime. And anyway, so I thought it was kind of an interesting little story.
Yes. Do you think that's a migration?
I have no idea on what migratory things about burrowing owls. I'm not sure that they're migratory, really.
Yeah. Leave snow country, you have to be.
Oh, okay, well, that explains it.
So they leave Eastern Oregon and up north, and they come to places along the coast or places that are warmer.
Okay, well,
But
I guess,
they have to be able to hunt stuff on the ground.
right, well, this is,
So certainly Eastern
old-
Central Oregon, they're not there in the winter.
yeah, this is in Halsey or near Halsey, so anyway. It's a very, it's a close bird. I think I just had my 400 millimeters and blew this up a little bit, but he was just right there. Okay, out near the end, up in Carlton, I got the northern pygmy owl. We were out having lunch in the backyard. He had lunch too with a junco, I believe, there. This guy is more of a, actually a world famous owl. This guy, let's see, the Statesman Journal called him Al Capone. Yes, Al Capone. It had attacked numerous actually, joggers in Bush Park in the early morning hours in 2015. Anyway, one of the first guys that got attacked was in the newspaper, was a doctor working at the hospital, jogging before his shift. And he became famous, went to the Rachel Maddow show, showed this photograph that I took, courtesy of David Craig, who had some of his undergraduate students who have owl eyes, I swear. It's pitch black. And she's up there. I think there's a bird up there. And up at the top of the cottonwoods up there, or I guess they were oak, what are they?
Bush Park, they're oaks.
Anyway, they way the heck up there. I could barely see it, but waited long enough and I was able to get this. So it said, world circulation, my photograph. Anyway, so that was kind of exciting. Barred owl. Now this guy, one more picture after this, but this is another version of the short-eared owl called a pueo. That's a Hawaiian owl. And they're just as similar. I mean, I don't know if you'd call them a subspecies, but they're a variant of the short-eared owl. This was on where the volcano was erupting on Saddle Road. This is on the slopes of, actually, this is on Mauna Kea, where the eruption was on Mauna Loa, but details. But that's the Hawaiian owl called pueo. In Hawaii, you have to look. This is a more difficult to find bird. This is the Hawaiian hawk, or eo. The eo is a name of a heavenly beauty, and that's what the eo part of the name comes from. That hawk was inhabiting Hawaii long before humans did. They have found them in the sediments or areas and that date back to the Pleistocene areas where they have huge ups and downs of sea level. And some people are philosophizing that the sea level might have been down and there might have been a cyclone, a hurricane off Mexico, that area, and migration of some owls. This was related genetically to both Swainson's hawk and short-tailed hawks, and along with a hawk that is found in the Galapagos now. But so the genes are similar, but this bird came and reproduced. That means there had to be more than one. And so developed and lived in Hawaii long before people got to Hawaii. Anyway, thank you very much. And that's it.
We're going to be doing some virtual travel here now. And our first trip with Dick Efton is going to take us to Costa Rica. So we're heading south first, and then we're going to go way north. So warm up because it's going to get cold.
Oh my God. Wait a minute. Wasn't right.
Okay, all right. My wife and I, Beth, last February, and another good friends of ours from Missoula, Montana, went to Costa Rica. And we started off in Alawea, the airport, spent the night there, and then headed up to town of Monteverde in the cloud forest. First morning out, auspiciously, we saw a wood stork heading the same direction we were going to, so that got us pretty excited. Quite early, right in the parking lot as we were leaving, a new bird for us, Costa Rican bird, this wren. We got to our place in Monteverde, and just next to the porch, this spectacular mott-mott, soon joined by its mate. And these birds were close, incredibly close to our deck. On the deck came this magnificent jay, big bird that I had never seen anything like that. We went nuts taking pictures of this guy. Look at that. Soon as the magpie jays left the area, in comes another similarly large jay and takes a look around. I think people there before had been feeding birds. We started feeding birds, but obviously this guy is looking for a handout. Same tree as the jays. These Hoffman woodpeckers showed up, very similar to our golden fronted woodpeckers. Off in another direction, again from the deck, parrots. This place, Costa Rica, is incredible. 900 different birds, and they're everywhere you walk, down the streets. You can see birds like this without trying. Cool. Pigeon, also from the deck. I'm letting the labels come in later. Some of you have probably been to Central America. You can guess, if you can't guess the bird, you can maybe guess the family. The next day we took off. We had reservations to visit the cloud forest there in Monteverde. It's a cloud forest. It was cloudy, gray skies, and I had to overexpose a lot of these pictures to get any kind of details. But for $20 extra, you can join a group with a guide, and oh boy, is it worth it. He saw, I bet we saw 40 birds, life birds, just on an hour and a half walk, including a quetzal, our first quetzal. Second day we're in Costa Rica, just outside of the park, this guy. Man, everything we had heard about birding in Costa Rica was coming true. Had to leave, continuing the trip, went down to the Nicoya Peninsula, a little drier, a little lower, again, Pacific Ocean, and right on the beach, getting all the crabs that we can't get this year yet in Oregon, with this incredible heron, size of a white egret. This guy is pretty imposing. So other tiger herons, I don't have pictures. Our first stroke on the trip, there on the Nicoya Peninsula. Should be looking here. At the tip of the peninsula, we took a hike, steamy, humid jungle, just howler monkeys echoing everywhere. It was incredible. Had to leave, took a ferry across, and went to Quepos, just outside Manuel Antonio National Park, which is the most visited park in Costa Rica. But they didn't have a lot of birds there. They had sloths. We saw several sloths. We saw this guy called a basilic, or the Jesus Christ lizard. And we actually saw him walking across water. That long tail, big claws. These guys attacked us. That's our balcony. He stole our pizza. These capuchin monkeys are all over the place. uh, walking out from the lodge, there's something that looks like a pileated, that it's a lineated woodpecker. Ferruginous, well, let you guys guess. That morning, many life birds. If you don't want to go to the crowded Manuel Antonio Park, I suggest an hour drive down the coast to Evita. So much easier birding, so many more birds. Again, you get up close and personal with so many species in Costa Rica. It's just incredible. Country the size of West Virginia, 900 birds. You don't have to go very far. Where we were staying there in the Vita, this chicken-sized woodrill walks right in front of us. And they're all over the place. This guy above our pool, little pool, put on such a clatter, a song that was cries, laughter, screams. Well, moving forward, we wanted to go to the Osa Peninsula. National Geographic has called this place the most biologically diverse area in the country. Spent 3 nights there. These are our hosts. He talked no English. I talked no Spanish. We got along great. Right above us, unloading luggage, scarlet macaws. Osa Peninsula, the largest remaining population of macaws. You could get your camera ready because they announced they're coming. Some more birds just taken from the yard where we were staying. Pretty special. Just hanging out there on the ground.
Tyra, this how they say that.
Okay. And
Kingbird.
again, looking over the Pacific Ocean. This guy, pictures just from the balcony. In the bushes next to us, good looking sparrow. Okay, we've hired the guide now. $45 a person, young kid, and was that worth it? He took us to this really tall tree by a river, look up in the sky, and in this tree, in and out all the time, were incredible species. Those Araucaria, then just below it, in comes this really noisy cuckoo. Eye level, we're still standing in the same place. All these hummingbirds. I'm just sharing a few pictures. What we saw there. Jumped in the car, went inland a little bit, got out, stood in one area for about 45 minutes. Wait till you see what comes. This bird, the guide got most excited about, called all his guiding friends. First time he had seen this olivaceous wood creeper in the area. So that was a big deal for him. Just another life bird for us. This flycatcher harasses all the other birds around and takes over the nest. We caught the song of this melodious blackbird. Then the trogons started showing up. They didn't want to be left out. Here's a pair of them. Again, just switch the cameras over. These two started mating right in front of us. They could care less. Now the guide knows that the tide is out, head back towards the ocean, and we see these squirrel monkeys. There are 4 monkeys in Costa Rica. As you can see, we saw 3 of them. Look at this guy. in the mangroves. Just walk right up to him. Typical nightjar. He thinks nobody's gonna, he's invisible. He just stands there. The picture, oh, and then no sound would come through. But yeah, nestling right out of the nest. 200 of these guys. 200 of these guys just kept coming out of that nest and into the ocean. Well, now we're got to leave the ocean. We're going to the Quetzal National Park, 7,000 feet. And there we're staying at the swankiest place, the nicest resort. We did mostly VRBOs, but this was a resort. And they're the guys guaranteed Quetzals. Okay, the beautiful, colorful birds of Costa Rica. This bird is a national bird of Costa Rica because it starts its mating song just prior to the rainy season. The farmers get ready to do whatever they have in the rain. Lots of tanagers. I mean, Costa Rica was amazing. This is all at that resort. Salegre, spa and resort. Got a restaurant. This guy amazed me, a flower piercer. Pierces into the bottom of these flowers to suck out nectars and insects. Just right out our door. Good looking finch. Followed by another finch. I swear we thought this guy had 3 eyes when he came towards us. And with hummingbirds, this Talamancha is so much like our magnificent Rivolis. Here's a good looking female hummingbird. Another cute guy. Violet ears were all over the place. And last and least, this tiny, one of the smallest hummingbirds, Costa Rica, the volcano. And if you haven't been, go. Birding is phenomenal.
I won't warm you up. We're going to freeze you out now because Albert Ryckman is going to take us to Iceland.
And it's true, it's cold in Iceland, even in the summer. We're there over the 4th of July, first week in July. And I'd always had a special place in my heart for puffins. And we wanted to go to Grimsey Island, which is arguably one of the best places to see puffins, Atlantic puffins in the world. Iceland is, and it turns out that the eel fish that the puffins, Atlantic puffins, at least in Iceland, feast on, are suffering a collapse in terms of their numbers in the southern Iceland. So there's actually increasing numbers in the Grimsey Island area. So there's in Grimsey Island, there are about at least 200,000, some say more than 300,000 nesting puffins every year. And so it's a great place if you have a soft spot in your heart for this comical looking bird. It's a great place to go. So if you've never been to Iceland, It's kind of like going to Costa Rica, go to Iceland. It's an extraordinary place. And it's not all, certainly not all for the birds, but there certainly are plenty of wonderful birds there. So this was not a trip to Iceland. This was a trip to Grimsby Island. So we flew into Keflavik, the airport for Reykjavik, spent a night, and then got in a bus. There were 8 of us as part of this tour, and drove 5.5 hours north to a town called Dalvik, the far north of Iceland. So we started in Reykjavik. Keflavik is the name of the airport, and then we drove all the way up near that Akurey, and there's a fjord, and Grimsby Island is, let's see, back up here. Grimsby Island is literally on the Arctic Circle, a 3-hour ferry ride, and the seas are not always calm. Grimsby Island is about 5 kilometers, 3 miles long. So it's not very big. You can just go, take the ferry over in a day, walk all the way around the island. And if you don't want to take a ferry, you can go on an expedition ship. There are, I'm sure, a dozen expedition ships that stop there every summer. They can't dock, but they can, people can come on in their Zodiacs and enjoy the island for a day, and then they go on about their circumnavigation of Iceland. So again, this is a picture of it, of the island. It's got one road, basically, town with a couple 300 people in it. There is an airstrip, so if you can't take the 3-hour ferry ride, you can fly into Keflavik and fly or drive up to Akurey, and then fly into the landing strip there. There are 2 guest houses. We stayed in one. There's another one right by the airport. You can also camp there. And there are puffins everywhere. You get out of land, you say, well, where are the puffins? Well, the puffins are everywhere. To get there, though, we stopped in Dalvik on the way, and there was a wetland and a wetland trail, which gave us an opportunity to see some of the migratory nesting birds that really are not all common on Grimsby Island. So the first one that we saw in some numbers were the whimbrels. These are, I guess it's fair to call them the Eurasian or the European whimbrels, and they nest in Iceland and then spend the winter in Europe and further south. Black-tailed godwit, basically the same principle. Really a beautiful bird. We didn't see any of these on Grimsby Island, only they're on the mainland. This is what the island mostly looks like. So the center part of the island is green, lush with grass, and the edges are cliffs, and the puffins have drilled holes, burrows. You never see the chicks. The chicks are in the bottom of the burrow. And they bring the fish into it, and apparently, the puffins start arriving in March, and they're basically mate for life. They pair for life, come back to the same burrow, lay their eggs, 1 or 2, I think, although you never see them. They hatch them, raise them, and then in August, basically they all fly away, and then the fledglings come out. My understanding is at night. Obviously we didn't see any since we were there in July, and then it's all over. They all go out to sea and see again next year. But you can just see how the cliffs are lined with these, and you can only get so close, and then they all fly away. They are hunted. The locals have used nets. And, really makes you feel sad to think about a pair for life, and one of them, gets netted and its neck rugged, and you know, it's only the breast meat. So they harvest thousands of them, I'm sure, a year. They do it somewhat surreptitiously. We were there for 5 days. We never actually saw them doing it. But they're, you know, families that, you know, stake out a claim, and apparently because they're getting scarce down south, there are people who come from southern Iceland specifically to get their fair share of puffins. So anyway, if you just look at this grass, it says this is perfect nesting habitat for these Arctic terns, which are there in their thousands. You just can't look anywhere without seeing them flying along over the grass, and they will attack you relentlessly if you're anywhere near their nest. So if you had anything to do with Arctic terns, you know that they are very aggressive. You better have a hat on or you're going to get your head picked for sure. And it gets annoying to hear that you have these things coming right at you. So it is on the Arctic Circle. You can't see it very well, but in the lower right picture, if you look straight out, there's a tiny little marble that supposedly marks where the Arctic Circle is. Now, the Arctic Circle moves a little bit every year, and they probably cheat a little bit. The Arctic Circle is probably a couple of yards out of the, you know, in the Atlantic, but close enough for government work. But again, you can see that the cliffside habitat for these nesting puffins. If you, the key is that you get low and crawl up close to the edge and then peek over the top. Most all of the pictures I've taken here are with my R5 and a 500 millimeter lens. So seem to be the, you know, right piece of equipment to have. This is a lighthouse at the southern tip of the island. It lets you look out at the Iceland coast. The cliffs are nesting ground for fulmar, northern fulmars, and kittiwake, black-legged kittiwakes mostly. Again, along that same area, all these puffins just begging to be photographed. So if you like puffins, you know, you'll get your limit. You can see their burrows that they've carved into the ground or excavated, and they'll go catch fish and bring them back and take them in and serve them to their chicks. So here's an example of what a burrow would look like. You know, an active one. Again, they may come back 10, 20 years, you know, the same pair to nest. And on the left, you can see my left, your left, our left. You can see a pair enjoying each other's company. One of the cliffs is situated so that there's almost always heavy winds, and the puffins basically hover in the winds. And again, massive numbers of these comical looking birds. It's if you like puffins, you're in puffin heaven for sure. So in order to catch these birds in flight, freeze their motion, need about 1/3200ths of a second. Although if they're hovering in the wind, maybe you can get by with 1/2000 or 1/2500. But it's good fun to spend hours along these coasts trying to get them, because they come zipping along at a high rate of speed, and it takes a little practice to get the birds in flight. Again, you know, pictures of these pairs. It's just, you know, wonderful to take, you know, to see these pairs that, you know, been together for perhaps a decade or two, you know, enjoying a brief moment before one of them has to go off and bring home the bacon. I mean, bring home the eelfish. And this is what the eelfish look like. This guy only got a few. The eelfish basically are on, I think on a, I didn't see any, but they're under the, you know, in relatively shallow water. and they stand on their, if you look pictures of them, they are vertical, and how these puffins scoop them up, and bring back a whole mouthful of them. It's just amazing. So the one on the left has eelfish. The one on the right has krill. And again, the fact that there are two kinds of prey, both the eelfish and the krill, provides better feeding opportunities for these puffins in the Grimsby area as opposed to further south. But,
How close were you to these pictures?
well, the one on the left was right over there, about 20 feet. And he just sat there. Most of the time they weren't quite so cooperative. The other one was maybe even, well, probably about the same. And we just kind of crept over the edge, and there he was standing there, and he posed for a considerable period of time. And that's these are my two favorite fish faces. So there's some more. And again, the eelfish is the traditional favorite, but we did see a few with bringing in the krill. So just really striking images of a striking bird, and that's what we were there for. This was one of my favorite birds in flight images. Just get some beautiful ones with a bouquet of the sea in the background. This guy was bringing home a few stripes of bacon. I think that's now the other cliff dwelling. There's a couple other cliff dwelling birds. One are the razorbills. This is one of Harry Fuller's favorites, and they aren't nearly as many razorbills, but they kind of enjoy the same kind of a nesting habitat. We're the same. Well, they don't dig burrows, but are in the same area, and we would often see them kind of perched nearby or together. And again, here's a nice birds in flight image. They also fly very fast and provide a challenge to anyone trying to freeze their action. So then they also have these murres, and I guess this is called the brindled murre, with one with the with the white.
They have several different.
Yeah.
They're all the same family.
So this was kind of my best in-flight image, I think, of one of they call them brindled, right? The one that have the stripe around their eye and back toward their ear. But quite a strikingly attractive bird in one bird photographer's opinion. And then there were these guillemots.
Pigeon?
No, these are not the pigeons. These are
Common,
Oh.
different species. Same
yeah. And the only pictures I got of him flying were away. So what can I say? They didn't like to be photographed face on. We did catch, so they were nesting in the rocks there at the ferry in the harbor. There's a big rock breakwater, and they were nesting, and there were maybe half a dozen of them in there.
So what's it holding in its bill?
I think they called it a butterfish or something. It's a fish, some kind of a little fish or big fish or whatever, big for it anyway.
Yeah.
The only predator, there's no cats or dogs on the island, allowed on the island or on the island. No foxes or coyotes or, so the only real predator these birds have is the skua. They're not going to take on a full-grown puffin, but they will take we were there in all of the big cloud of, kittiwakes and, and fulmars and squawking. And the next thing you know is this skua shows up with a chick. And we saw that happen a couple of times. And this would be what? No, not the puffin. They don't bother the puffins. I never, it's because you can see how these kittiwakes are just parked right there out in the open where they'd be easy picking for for a skua. So the skua, basically spooks all the birds. They fly off in a massive crowd, and then it's a buffet for the skua to have whatever's perched on the rocks, whether it's a chick or an egg or whatever. So European golden plovers nest there and then will migrate to Europe, and I think they go to Africa as well. They weren't as prolific as some of the others, but it was fun to see them. We see the West Coast version of them in Hawaii all the time. Just incredible how far these birds will migrate. The Eurasian oyster catchers were seeing more profusion in the Iceland mainland, but we saw a couple pairs here, and they do nest there on Grimsey Island. Oyster catchers are a personal favorite. And there's one in flight. This one was actually there at Dalvik. We're calling this a purple sandpiper. They have sandpipers there. There's not really beaches there. There's a small, some small rocky shores with kelp. This was one of the inhabitants. I don't know if you've ever been, chased is a strong word, but these red shanks are very noisy, and they'll take off and circle around you and screech and holler, and are kind of can become annoying. And there's the in-flight version. And this is the first time I've seen snipes with their broken wing, just like with killdeer. This guy would, went into his broken wing routine, and I, that was kind of interesting to see. They fly very high. I guess it's part of their kind of mating activities. Fly very high and rub something together and make this weird winnowing sound. It's really peculiar. You just look around and say, where's that coming from? And as you see something way up there, and it turns out it's one of these snipes putting on a show. Redneck phalaropes, quite a few of them. There was a little pond there, some small little ponds, and it was kind of fun to photograph them there. And they'd be small little flocks, and it's fun to photograph. Oops. That was somebody snuck that one in. These are Arctic terns. They're every now and then you'd see this tiny little fuzzball of a chick that was kind of out wandering around, and the parents were trying to hurt it or and bring it something to eat. So it's there's just these Arctic terns are just amazing, and just like any tern, they're just aerial acrobats and amazing to see and watch. Just amazing numbers of them. And this one was hovering in the harbor, trying to get a fish out of the harbor. So if you like Arctic terns, it's a great place to have them peck on your head. So something I'd never seen, or I guess knew about, was that these Arctic terns will skim feed. And there's one place where there's this little kind of open pond, and these Arctic terns just take turns, no pun intended, doing this. So they would just fly along, and then they just go down and skim, and they did enough. They must be getting something. I have no idea, what they were getting, but something enough to keep them from coming back. Snow bunny nest there. And then, it is the land of the midnight sun. So this was taken, at basically midnight. with that, we'll conclude the program.
One more short one to go. This is actually an unpaid advertisement because Cynthia, Donald, and I have conspired. We're going to do a great gray owl trip to Jackson County in mid-June. And so I hit up on some of my buddies. Since I did the great gray owl book a few years ago, there's a small coterie now of great gray owl addicts in the Ashland, Medford area. And they spend most of their waking hours up in the mountains following these owls. So these are all pictures that I didn't take, but they're taken by really good photographers. And I'll give you credit at the end, or give you the credit for the photographers. But the great gray owls have become probably the favorite bird in the Medford Jackson area now that people sort of know where to look for them and how to look for them. What you need to know is this is the largest owl in terms of size, measurement, but not a heavy owl. He's lighter than a great horned owl, pound and a half lighter than a snowy owl that has to be able to beat the crap out of an Arctic hare. These guys eat voles, shrews, small mammals, an occasional junco, even an occasional frog, but they don't eat big meals. They're not going to take your cat and rip it apart like a great horned owl will. They're going to go out and catch little stuff that they can swallow whole head first. So they tend to nest in areas where there aren't any great horned owls, which tend to be areas where there aren't a lot of people. There aren't a lot of barns. There's not a lot of livestock. So I think they were once quite widespread. I think they probably would have been very common here 250 years ago when the Indians managed the Willamette Valley with fire, because you would have had big oak trees and lots of dead limbs, hollow areas to nest, broken off tree trunks like this, and not a lot of brush. These guys can't hunt through manzanita, salal, heavy duty sword ferns. They need open meadows where they can hit the ground and get through the grass or the forbs very easily because they hunt with their ears. So they'll cruise with these huge wings, like a giant paper airplane. They'll go like this across a meadow. You can't believe it. There's no wing motion. They're just floating across this meadow. And if they hear something, they drop straight on it. So they grab stuff and kill it before they even see it. So they need these open meadows, but then they need safe places to nest. And these are classic nests. Broken off tree trunks are one of their best places to nest in nature. They will occasionally use an old nest of, say, a red tail or a raven. And now in areas like Jackson County and much of Oregon, they also get platforms. People put up platforms that are about 20 to 24 inches across, about 18 inches deep, with a rim about 2 to 5 inches high. It's not a box, it's just a platform with an edge, and they'll lay their eggs up there. And they leave the nest pretty early, usually less than 3 weeks old when they leave the nest, which is very unusual for a large raptor. We're not sure why they've evolved that way, but they do. This is a very typical little guy here. He's probably less than a month old, but he's already out of the nest. So when they get out of the nest, they can't fly yet. So they have to use their big beak and their giant oversized feet to climb back up into the trees where they're safe. We had one nest that we were watching once, and owls, as you probably know, lay their eggs in sequence every few days, and they start sitting on the egg as soon as one is laid. So they don't all hatch on the same day like robins. Monday, owl number 1 is born. Tuesday or Thursday, owl number 2. So by the time you get through, if there's more than 2, there may be a week to 10 days, maybe even 2 weeks if there's 4 of them, difference between the old one and the young one. So there's different sizes, so they don't all leave the nest at the same time. And we had a nest that we were watching near a bed and breakfast up at about 5,000 feet in the Cascades. And the oldest one was quite bold, stood on the edge of the nest all the time, fledged one day, never saw him again. Gone. probably hit the ground in the daytime. Coyotes, foxes, raccoons, I mean, ravens, all the things that kill an owl about that big were probably just waiting. Number 2 owl fledged about 6 days later. And because mom didn't have to take her attention anywhere else, she was on the log next to it. We got pictures of mom and the baby cuddling on the log and dad bringing them food. And that one survived. They eat small stuff. Lots of mice and voles. Here's mom feeding the baby. The general pattern is dad hunts, mom watches the kids and feeds them. And once they are able to fly, she leaves and dad does the teenager, here's how to be an owl training. And she goes off to her own meadow so she's not competing for food anymore. But until they can fly well enough to keep up with dad, she's the guardian. She's bigger and she's always watching the young, and he's the hunter. A little bit like harriers. They also do something that in my estimate unique in the bird world. If you know anything about cranes and a lot of other large birds, it tends to be really brutally competitive around the nest. The big ones get the food, the young ones, the little ones starve to death. Cranes lay 2 eggs. Rarely do they raise 2 young. The second one goes away. These guys are just the opposite. Mom feeds the little ones first. So they have evolved in the kinds of climate and habitat where you maximize every year because next year you may not lay the eggs. A lot of their habitat where they're a dominant predator are places like up where the tundra is and they're eating lemmings. This year, lots of lemmings, let's lay 8 eggs and try to raise them all. Because next year there won't be any lemmings, so we won't lay any eggs. Down here in the south, they tend to be pretty even. 2 to 4 every year until a drought comes along and then they can't lay eggs. But in normal years, this far south, they have a modest number, but they're very good at raising the weaker ones, which you don't see that in very many of the predators. They tend to say, that one's too weak, forget about it. I mean, literally in the cranes, they eat the baby and raise the stronger one. And I love cranes, but it's really brutally competitive. These guys are just the opposite. They do really well in snow. They can hear extremely well, as you would expect, being owls. They'll fly really low over the snow, and if it's not too deep, they will break through the crust with this. Their skull is about this size, but their head's as big or bigger than yours. Layer after layer after layer of feathers. So this is a padded hammer they can use to break through the crust. And just at the last second, they whip up their talons and grab whatever it was they hurt. But they use their face to get through the snow. And the ears are in here, and they're offset. They have bifocal vision, so do we. That's how we can do so well. If I saw a mouse walk across, I know exactly where it was because I triangulated with my 2 eyes and my brain. They did the same thing with their hearing. One ear points up to the right, the other one points down to the left. So if they hear a sound in front of that disc, they know exactly where it is. We can't do that. We're going like this, trying to figure out where it is. They know it's right there. So they catch things without ever seeing them. Those wings are a foot from front to back. So that's as much wing space as you think it is. That's a huge amount of wing. And then the tail is a foot long. So when they're coasting, there's almost no effort in their flight. You'll see them drop off a perch, go like that. And at the last minute, they may not flap going across a 50-yard wide meadow. They may not flap once. Just amazing. Very few birds can do that. And of course, they're silent wings. Because like all owls, they have those little hairs on the edge of the feathers that break up the turbulence. So they make no noise at all. There's a raven trying to harass one. Ravens are one of their natural enemies are goshawks, ravens, and great horned owls. Other than that, almost nobody bothers with them. And ravens are only harassment and stealing eggs and babies. Looking right at you. And those are the photographers. So anyway, if you're interested in the great gray owl trip in June, get a hold of Cynthia and let her know. And we're about to pick the dates, but I think it's gonna be around the 15th to a few days after that. Thank you all. Wait, goodness.